Hello and welcome to Fire in the Belly. Today we're having myself, Mighty Pete, and we have Jill Thiry. Good afternoon to you, or good evening. Good afternoon, I should say. Yes, thanks, right?
It's actually good. It is good afternoon here. Yes, just afternoon.
The joys of being multi-continental and all over the place, right? So we get to connect, and
Yeah.
it's beautiful, beautiful. So Jill, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on. So tell us, who are you, what do you do, and where are you from?
Well, thank you for inviting me, Pete. And I am from Wisconsin originally in the United States. And I now reside in San Diego after a journey through Europe and San Francisco. And I'm now co-located down in Southern California, San Diego, but I live half time in Tecate, Mexico.
Where's home then?
Well, home is both. I actually have two homes. So I work a half week and I reside where I work at a beautiful health and fitness resort in Tecate, Mexico, which was very important in my journey the past 20 years. And then on the days when I'm not working, I'm here working on my own business, Club Change, here in San Diego. So I have two homes.
Wow. And is that the way you like it? Is that the way you want it?
Yeah, I do. It's interesting. I've thought a lot about it. I also still have a home up in San Francisco that I now rent out because I moved down here 8 years ago and thought, if it doesn't work out, I can always go back up to San Francisco. And so I love having all these beautiful choices that I enjoy them all. So I guess there must be some kind of nomadic thing in me from way back when, who knows? But I love them all. And I actually have a vision of, 10 years from now, spending time in numerous places versus just one.
Talk to me about your visions then. Is that something that you use a lot, your vision?
I do a lot of intention setting because that is something that actually is probably not a fire in my belly, but it has been a pilot light in my belly for my entire life. And I intend to grow my Club Change business into a virtual business. And so I do a lot of accountability and planning for myself. So I spend time in the present thinking about what I want in the future. And it helps me then get. So I feel in some ways I've been able to manifest this really beautiful life where my biggest challenge is kind of figuring out what I love the least in order to take off my schedule versus the other way around. And that is my biggest challenge these days right now. And I feel pretty fortunate for that.
I have to ask them, what do you love the least? So what's your main love then, Jill? What really is the key? I know you get to sort of have this bit of life of both. What's your main love?
Oh, my main love is it's teaching. Actually, it's helping others. I really get a lot out of, so I teach, I spend half the week teaching, I guess you'd call them not really fitness classes, but I teach at a spa, at a health resort half the week. And then I come here and I teach groups. I teach accountability groups and I lead on Zoom some of the things that I actually physically taught prior to the pandemic. And I love doing those things. So I fill my day with that, and doing those things actually fills my cup. So, and the more I do it, the more I realize that. So that's why it kind of becomes my challenge, because I have to stop at some point in time and do other things that I love less once in a while.
What a lovely way to lead your life, right? Just to have those opportunities.
I feel pretty, I have a lot of gratitude.
So tell me, well, what does fire in the belly mean to you, Jill?
Fire in the belly means something that really drives and pulls you to being your better self. To me, it represents probably intention, but passion. And I think as I've listened to your shows, it's your unique gift. It's the ability to, I think, recognize what that fire is, be a little comfortable in the potential discomfort, of being there and then acting on it.
Hmm. Talk to me about your journey with passion. I mean, is it something that's always been in your life then, this fire in the belly, this passion?
Yeah, it's interesting when I think about it. And as I coach young people now, because I spent a couple of years just traveling and literally a few years in Europe where I was living very hand to mouth and sleeping in a tent and in public restrooms for a while and living in different cultures, different languages, and different spiritual beliefs. And I think that created in me this really solid platform as of just being a human being. And it's not all about having stuff and having a title and having the 2.5 kids and the white picket fence and the whole 9 yards. That really people are the same all over the world. And so I think as I look back in my many, many decades of experience, I kind of never did anything I didn't like doing for very long. I believe somehow my parents did a great job, or my environment did a great job of teaching me that to be human is also it's a pleasant experience. So if there's something that really is not working for you, that you always have tons of choices. Just be willing to sit down and look at them and be in choice versus others' expectations or automatic habits or behaviors. These are really good questions, Pete. But I just realized that I've never worked a job that I haven't liked for long. I mean, I've done a lot of different things. I mean, people like hear about what I've done. I mean, I taught skiing and kayaking, and I worked in the insurance industry and then the publishing industry and had offices in San Francisco and New York, and now I live in San Diego and Mexico. I mean, I have always just kind of gone with my passion, or that, should I say, that pilot light in my belly, and allowed myself to make changes and pivot and be in choice. And so I guess I love that. I guess I consider that my pilot light in my belly.
Do you live by a code of conduct, or do you have a set of rules for yourself or anything?
No, not that I'm aware of, other than I developed what I would call the lazy person's steps to change. And it's part of what I guide and lead people in my 8-week clubs or my free Set My Intention classes. And those literally just came to me out of trial and error. Like there were a couple of pivotal events 20 years ago. Actually, 20 years ago, this New Year's will be the first time I visited a very special place in my life, which is this resort I work at, Rancho La Puerta. And I went there for New Year's, and it was a year that I had gotten a divorce. It was a traumatic year for me. And I'd helped build a thriving publishing business that struggled after 9/11, and it was in financial services. And it was just a time when the financial services industry was struggling. And for the first time in my life, I was laid off, and I was paid to not work. It was back in the days when they actually gave you some pretty nice severance packages. And at that point in time, I did 2 things. One, I went to this spa for a holiday because I just wanted to do something completely different. And 2, my father and brothers had started an annual meeting that they called Boys Weekend. And it was, my brother and father had been consultants. And I don't know exactly, I can't speak for them. But in my observation, they wanted their relationships to be better. So they decided to get together for a weekend once a year and hold each other in kind of this really beautiful, tough love accountability group for each other, and sit down for a weekend and talk about what they wanted, and then set commitments, and then hold each other lovingly accountable. And they probably started at about 5 years before I joined, but it was really pivotal when I joined. They did an open meeting and asked the rest of the members of the family if we wanted to join. And I opted in. I was like, you know what? I was really kind of, at that point in time, when I talk about being in joy and manifesting, I was just looking for what is my next thing, right? Because at that point in time, I was just realizing that the choices I had made were not working for me. And so I just started saying yes to new things. And that was one of the new things. And it led me down this path of being a professional student of change. It's like, okay, I can like sit down and think about what I want and really assess my values and have different choices and evaluate that in a non-judgmental way, and be in the good and the bad of making choices and making changes and allowing all of the feelings around that to be okay. So I did it, and I made a lot of great changes, I thought, in my health and in my mind and in my spirit. And so then I started telling other people about it, and my friends started doing it with their kids, and it was working. And then people started asking me. So then I started doing private one-on-ones just because I was just sharing, and that's just what I do. I teach and I share, and I'm a lazy person, so I'd figure out the easiest way to process it. And so that worked out really well. And suddenly I was filling up my time with private, you know, consulting sessions. And then I was like, okay, this is not scalable. So so I really kind of turned it into a process and started creating groups, and that's what I'm doing now.
Do you feel guided in the groups? I mean, how do you tend to lead it? Is it, well, do you
Oh, I
feel
love that.
guided full stop? Maybe that's the best question.
I do feel like this has been gifted to me.
Mhm.
I feel that when you open your eyes to actually what's around you with an open heart and an open mind, that things that probably have been around you all the time, you just haven't seen them because you were so driven for a certain path or a certain activity. So I do feel like I'm guided by powers that are greater than is human. But I also now have 20 years of experience doing it. And so I feel like I do gift people with my experience and kind of just some easy railroads along the way, some easy, um, they are rules, I guess. I call them steps in my process, and there's 8 of them, and they work because I do them all the time, and I lead groups that do them all the time, and people find joy in them, and they find ease and grace, and that's just delicious.
Would you be, are you an intuitive person? I mean, do you tend to pick up energy as much as you give?
Sometimes I'm pretty exhausted at the end of the day. But yes, I would say that I receive tremendous gifts as I give them. Yes.
And that's, I mean, it's always interesting, isn't it? You know, from the visualization side, you know, the the intuition side. I mean, do you tend to sense that with other people, or are you more of the guiding and let them guide themselves? What's your normal sort of view?
They guide themselves. I simply introduce concepts and share with them. I call kind of, some people call it their inner Jill when they think of something that I've recommended. So, you know, so one of my rules, I guess you could call it, or steps, is to really watch your language, because I believe what you say becomes what you do and what you think, right? And you can impact that language when you take the time to notice it. So when you're spending a lot of time in I should, or I'm going to try, or I'll plan, or I can't, or I can, that impacts what you do. And usually I find that a path of change is a languaging, whether it's in your head and you're doing it silently, or whether you're doing it verbally or physically. If you can get some of that new languaging out into the world and into your story, it creates really fun paths that were always there. You know, it's not like it's a new thing that suddenly, you know, the universe descended on you, but you are choosing to affirm it, to aspire to it, to live it, to think it, to be it. And so I do spend time with little notes around my house at times, and I do encourage my friends and colleagues and clients to do that as well. I send them little, you know, heart-shaped sticky notes and say, put this on your mirror and say it all the time. You know, I am strong, I am enough, I am, you know. And we also spend a lot of time being kind to ourselves, because I think as human beings, we tend to be tough on ourselves. I do, at least. So people who share my experience is like, okay, I'm really good at being critical of myself, and having a to-do list that's filled with a list of lists, right, that I have to punch through. So when I'm careful with myself and kind, and I bring things down to really simple actions that are repeatable and easy to at least initiate, that's just another practice or a guide or a rule that I practice, and I help. I was just going to say, and I try to help other people, but I help other people do that as well. And it works for them, most of them.
Can you give us an example of this sort of language upgrade? You know, because I find this a fascinating concept, which I agree with. I mean, I think a lot of listeners would be curious to know what sort of some words that will be mixed in that can be better or can be upgraded to something else.
Well, it turns out that I find it's best to just sit down and think about what it is that how you want to be, right? So I have a process where we do word boarding, where I ask people a lot of questions, and they just literally, one of my clients calls it vomiting words on a sheet of paper. I choose to say, popcorning or sprinkling words onto a sheet of paper. And I just ask them a number of questions, and they put the words, I invite them to I invite them to answer all the questions on one sheet of paper in just one word or two word clusters. So I call it a word board. And so they end up with this sheet of paper with all of these words that are from different things, and I might change up the questions. So like during the holiday season, I might change up the questions and tie in some holiday expectations, or, some old resolution language or something, whatever. And then we do sit down and close our eyes and do a breathing exercise that I find helps us all get into our belly, get into our heart, and get out of our head, get out of our ego. So I'll typically spend a little bit of time just having people close their eyes and get in touch with their breath and kind of cleanse their palate, maybe with a poem or a chant or something, and then fill themselves with enoughness and love, and then open their eyes and just circle one or two of them. So it helps everybody, and it helps me focus in on one or two, because if we try and do everything, if you're like me, you try and do everything, I fail. I get into overwhelm, and then nothing gets done. It's like, oh. But if I can net it down, and if I can help others kind of net it down, it becomes more practicable. And then we choose one, and that becomes the word, and we practice it. We'll share it out loud. I also lead bedside choirs and love to sing and love to chant. And I find that the actual speaking of something kind of gets it out of your spin. It gets it out of those, gazillion thousands of thoughts that you have every day, the repeat thoughts that you're not aware of. But if you speak it, which is what I found worked when I joined my Father and the Brothers in Voice Vegan, it's like, okay, if I promise to myself and to you that I'm going to commit to doing this one thing for the next week or the next day or the next month or the next year, it doesn't matter. I find it's best to just commit to it for like 3 to 6 weeks or 8 weeks. But if I say something to you, if I actually speak it, it kind of helps to get it out of the spin. And then if I write it down and put it on my mirror and practice it, like those are some of my 8 steps, think about it and write it down and practice it and say it. It manifests itself in your practices, as long as you're being kind and willing to sit in your choices. So the other thing I found in practicing this is that it's okay. Well, from the practicing of that word. So let's say it's a mantra, or it's an aspiration, or it's an affirmation, or I don't care what you call it. It's something that I recommend that you say to yourself often, and you put reminders up because it's not in your habit world yet. So it's helpful to have reminders because it's new. So then you find 3 practices that you can do that bring you that. So if that word ends up being an adjective, because our word boards are usually kind of a combination of nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, it doesn't matter, right? But whatever your word is, then we and I find easy to do practices that help you have actions that are specific, that bring you that mantra or that aspiration or that affirmation. So I don't know, is there a word that would you like to do a little bit of it? yourself here?
Ooh. Well, in relation, let's try and hone it down a bit. I mean, what particular area would you think?
It doesn't matter. So, okay. So right now we're coming up on the holiday season.
Mhm.
I'm not exactly sure when this will broadcast, but if there was one intention you had for next year, I mean, we won't do the whole word board exercise, but
Mm.
somebody might have a resolution that they've tried to do for decades, right? This might be a good example. And they get a couple weeks into the new year and get frustrated and overwhelmed and discouraged and disappointed. And you end up just kind of coming right back to that negative languaging that we end up in automatically. So, I can think of quitting smoking or losing weight, or I don't know, what do you find?
Well, let's choose losing weight. That's always a great one.
Okay. So, you come into the new year, I'm going to quit drinking, or all right. So quitting drinking is a good one. I'm going to quit drinking for a month because it's going to help me lose weight and I'm going to feel better. And I just got through the holiday season filled with sugar, right? And so what I would do, what I would encourage myself or colleagues to do is write down a word of why they want to quit drinking, right? And so we would do an exercise and envision that as like, okay, so let's say you do quit drinking for the next 8 weeks. What is that like? What do you look like? What do you smell like? What does it bring you? What's the why? Why do you want that? And so we might do a little envision and come down to a word. So maybe their word is, maybe it's for their liver, maybe it's for their mind, maybe it's to be healthier, lose weight, lighter, let's just say. So I would then, for example, say, okay, put that word lighter on a little post-it everywhere, on your monitor, on your mirror, on your refrigerator. And every time you walk past it, just say, I am, not I want to or I'm trying to, I am lighter, because it affirms that the practice that you're doing of not drinking is bringing you what you want versus the shoulda, coulda, have to do that's behavioral, right? And filled with judgment and stories and lessons and maybe choices that have not been yours. So it allows you to be in your why in a way that's kind and loving. Like it's also kind of a nice, like, oh, I'm lighter. Even if you're not looking at it and saying it, you will be. That becomes your self-talk, your languaging. And then I take the next step of then saying, okay, what are 3 things that you could do this week or every day to be lighter? And my guess is the person then would put, I'm not going to have a drink today. Or I'm only going to, and so then I ask the questions, well, is that too much? Like if you're having 2 glasses of wine every night last week, right? So that's 7 days a week. And now you're like, I'm going to 0. Is that like the easiest, kindest thing to do? Maybe it's not. Maybe you want to say, instead of, I'm going to quit drinking at New Year's, it's like, okay, the first week in January, I'm going to be lighter, or more clear, whatever, by only drinking 2 glasses of wine or 1 glass of wine 3 nights a week. And that is a little more feasible. It's a little more doable. It's maybe a little kinder and it's more achievable. So when you do that, I find that it happens to nourish your practice and nourish your new behavior and prompt you along. And so you end up a lot of my clients and I end up overachieving then. It's like, wow, I didn't drink at all last week. Not because I told myself I had the resolution that I was going to quit drinking. No, I decided I was going to be kind to myself and limit it and be conscious of it and be in choice versus automaticity and be kind to myself. And even if I didn't do it, so the other part of that thing is even if I didn't do it, so let's say I got to the end of the week, because part of my practice as well is to be honest then at the end of the week and say to yourself, because honesty and truth is a big thing without a lot of judgment or adjectives in it. So then at the end of the week to be able to sit down and go, all right, did I only drink 1 glass of wine 3 days a week? And the answer is yes or no. There's no gray. There's no like, I kind of did, I didn't. It's yes or no. And then maybe give yourself a percentage and think about, well, okay, So what did I choose? I want lighter. What did I choose? If what I chose, if I chose to drink, did that impact my lightness? Did that impact my why? What did I choose instead? And I get to begin again next week to build that muscle, to build that new habit, to build that that change, not being afraid of change, to be in a place where you're loving the pivots that you do, to changing, to bringing yourself, whatever those beautiful things are that you aspire to, that you intend for yourself. So for me, it's all about bringing future intentions into your present life with loving kindness. Wow. Gosh, I'm going to have to listen to this recording to remember that. It's a nice little tagline.
Well, those future intentions then mixed in with choices, right? So is what I'm assuming the visualization side or the visioneering is we see what our future could hold or does hold, if you like, if we want to future pace the language. But then we say, what's our choice today? As you say, it's, do I choose to eat that or drink that Starbucks or whatever unhealthy choice? But it's a flip, isn't it? I mean, really, because so many people are going pain based, going, I'm going to lose 44 pounds and blah blah blah, and do this in January, and I'm going to stop this, and this. I mean, that's pain. That's pain based, right? As opposed to
Yeah, and
pleasure based.
that is so key. So you talk about the languaging, which I'm finding is really important. So it's kind of switching from I get to give myself something versus I have to do something.
Mm.
And I think if we all ask ourselves, the question in the end is what is more important than your own health and wellness? Like in your life, what's more important than your health and wellness?
Love.
Love. And that would, that would be the one thing that people answer the most often, their kids or their
Mm.
spouse or just love in the world. So I kind of say that there's really nothing more than your own health and wellness because it shows love for yourself. And I do believe that it's difficult for you to love other things and other people and be a great mentor and example if you don't love yourself. So even love, I would replace love with health and wellness. That your health and wellness, which to me is wholeness, it's not, a perfect body and a great blood pressure. It's the whole person. It's the mind, body, and spirit being healthy and well. And then you do share that love with others. And so when you frame or future language, your future intention around loving something about yourself or others that you can model for others, and it's something that you get to give yourself, and then you get to give it to others. That is love, and it's not out of obligation to some cultural expectation or some familial environment that you grew up in. It's your choice. It's a way of being. It's a way of being your highest self, I think.
Do you like yourself? Do you love yourself?
I do.
Has that always been the case, or when did that kick in for you?
Oh, I think it's always been the case. It's a really good question. I don't think I've ever not felt love. I have felt fear. I have certainly felt times when I was not exhibiting my best behaviors, but I perceived at the time that I was loving that behavior, right? So there was a time in my life where I worked hard and played hard, and was relatively abusive to this body and probably some of the people around me, you know. Um, but at the time, it was in a place of strength and recognition, and I do think I've always loved myself, and I'm filled with gratitude for my environment that created that. Like, we are all gifts on this earth. Just being born, you're a gift, and maybe that is the fire in the belly, is finding that gift that's in you and being it courageously and proudly and sharing it regardless of what other people think.
How many people do you think? Obviously, there's completely unstatistical, but I mean, how often do people actually find their thing, their gift, their fire in the belly? Do you think?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I I don't know. It's like it's so tough to say. It's like, would I say it's over 50% or under 50%? To tell you the truth, I think it's under 50%, at least in the environment that I'm in. I would say it's not the majority. But I also believe that we end up circling ourselves with people that we're like, right? So um, so I feel like my circle of people that I'm exposed to is a higher percentage. So it's a really good question. Well, how would you answer that question? How would you describe what is the fire in the belly, and how many people do you find, like, since that's kind of a passion or a gift thing, maybe?
I think I personally think it's frustratingly low, as you say, and I think it could be as low as 20% that actually find their thing, find their calling, find their purpose, find their raison d'etre or whatever. It's and it makes me a little bit sad. I do sometimes forget that I get to speak to a lot of people with fire in their belly, so I get a slightly glossed view of the world. But then you sort of go outside of those boundaries and go further afield, and you realize that, yeah, unfortunately, I think it's not that much. Which,
Yeah, yeah. I'm on the planet, right? I think it probably varies by country. And I don't know why I think that, but I do think that there's cultural expectations
sure.
and so wow, that'd be an interesting study for someone to do. It'd be really hard to define, but that would be fun. That would be a fun article to read.
Have you ever been this version of yourself before, either in your childhood or in previous lives or anything?
Well, I think I've always been this person. So yeah, as a child, I was still me. I was still kind of courageous and adventurous and um, independent, and um, I wasn't as wise as this version. As we age, I think we get some perspective that I didn't have, but sometimes that perspective limits the experience. Um, so it's almost like I'm almost thinking like, do I feel like I'm a combination of even other people or other energies, right? Like I believe that we're just this container. I'm this spirit or gift in this container right now. And was this spirit or gift a combination of other containers in other places or uh, other karmic manifestations? I don't know. I think our spirits, I think that gut, that soul, that extra gift, it's not, we can't describe it. I would never, it's kind of like love, right? The minute you try to put human words around it and explain it, it takes away the power of how amazingly superhuman, non-human it is. So I don't think we can even conceive of that. So, um, so I've always been me. I've always been my gift. I haven't been the best presentation of it. I think I get better and better and better with being more vulnerable with it and more honest with it. And
Is that key?
and I think so. I think so. Because if we always think we're the smartest, bettest, reddest thing, then we're not open. Like the biggest gifts have come to me when I sit in not having the answers and allow myself to not be in control and not having all the answer and asking. And sometimes it's just asking the next person next to me whose experiences and view is completely different, right? Like asking you something, I'll be like, oh, wow, thank you for that view, because I don't see that view. I see the view that I've carved from over 60 years of experiences and lessons and teachers and life. But when I allow myself to be raw and vulnerable enough to ask and be open to other people or other powers or other things or whatever, it's always a great gift.
What's some powerful questions we can ask ourselves?
Why am I here? Who am I? How can I add value?
And who am I alone that's a lifelong question, right?
Right. And to try and answer that, and see, I catch myself to try and answer that. And to answer that, like I noticed when I say the word should or try or plan to or have to. So to answer that without using your name or your career or like those societal typical ways, you know, when you introduce yourself to someone, who are you, where you're from? I'm like you know, to answer who you are in a way that's at a level deeper than that.
Are you where you're supposed to be then?
Yes and no, as is life. Yes and no, strength and a weakness, yin and yang. I would say, yes, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be because I'm here. And that's a gift in and of itself. And I can always aspire to be better. So I think that's why I enjoy spending so much time in intention, because I get to, through my language and through my intentions and my being my best self and my heart, intentionally carve a new path that's filled with what I believe I can share with the world.
Just define and setting intentions for us, because you know, not everyone's going to be used to this sort of terminology or this practice as such.
So for me, an intention at its base level is something that's not in your present. So an intention is anything that is just not, it's not presently in whatever it is your practice. So those are the words I use. It's not in your present practice. And what is in your practice is all of your life's experiences. And so you kind of carve this thought pattern or activity pattern, movement pattern, or belief pattern that is carved from your experiences. And so an intention is not in that. So I describe it as like, this might help your listeners, as a canyon. And it's a beautiful canyon, and all of our canyons are different. Some are narrow and colorful, and some are steep and sharp, and it doesn't matter, it's yours because it's filled with your stuff. But as years go on, it's very automatic, right? So then as we get older, every day we might be more inclined to be in our canyon because it's easy and it's filled with gravity and it's already carved and it's safe and we know it to be true. And our intentions I describe as like the silver lining up at the top of the edge of that canyon, and they're not automatic, and they're not easy, and they're not safe. So they're a little edgy, and they're new, and they're less safe, and so, but there's something you want in your canyon because they're your intention. They're not somebody else's intention. It's your intention and your intention only. So the practices that I do and we share are these little kind steps that you can do. So the intention would be lighter, right? That would be an intention. I want to be lighter. Like I want to quit drinking or do whatever, but because I want to be lighter. And I see that being lighter would benefit. It would be a gift to me. It's a gift to my health and wellness. And when I give myself a gift, I tend to give it to others. Like it tends to kind of go into the world. So if we can think about it that way, it's like, wow, so this intention, this thing that I want in my life is a lovely gift, and it's a holiday season. So I can do some little tiny steps that practice that and help me nourish that rivulet into my canyon, right? Whether it's raining or not, I can find some, I can rain on my own kindness to help nourish that. And if I do that enough, for most people, it's 20 to 90 days. Some people it's instantly, right? Like some people can just say, okay, I will do this, and they'll do it. And it all depends on what the intention is and who that person is and what their experience is. But for most of us, it's a path of kindness that we can do, baby steps, and focus on just that one intention, just those one or two kind practices for 20 to 90 days. And then it becomes part of your canon. So then your intention becomes your life, your practice, your habits. And then you share it with the rest of the world. We hope.
That's beautiful. I mean, I'm just curious in that when you're setting your intentions, how do you, I always cautious the word how, but how do you separate it from the ego? How do you be sure that it's pure? So it's not driven by a void or a misbelief or anything else. Is there a method, do you think?
Oh, the ego is so strong and it's always so there. The ways that we attempt to do our best to nourish those intentions and stay out of our ego is we do breath and visualization work, and we chant our mantras. So we name the intention and we say it. So we will practice just slowing down, being in our breath, being in the gift that we are at this moment, and then we'll practice saying our intention. So I choose, I will, I am. And the process, that I believe that process helps you get out of ego and helps pull it into your heart and into your practice. I think the languaging element is really strong. To just say I will, I am, not I'm trying to, or I didn't. To just say I chose instead of putting judgment. So we try and stay to the best of our ability out of judgments and out of self-criticism and into positive languaging, so that it's a place that we're going to, not away from. Not that that isn't ego-filled as well. But I'd have to say the meditation and chanting practice for me, and the literally verbalizing and affirming your intention, is probably what I've found to be the best practice for that. And then sitting in the honest choices, right? So that sitting in the truth of the moment without a bunch of adjectives, right? So the adjectives can be totally in the aspirational gift, but when you sit down in your choices, it kind of becomes a yes and no. Like there's not like a, oh, I kind of did it 60% and this is why, and I was busy. It's like, no, how did you choose it? What did you choose instead of it? Why is this an intent? Kind of coming back to the why. So the why is not, that is ego filled, right? So I don't know if I have the answer to that question. It's so super hard. I just try and get people out of their thinking brain as much as possible and just get into their heart, to be in love with themselves, to be in love with the journey, to be in love with your choices, to be in love. Like the way to lose weight is to be in love with, to be honest and to be comfortable with saying what weight you are right now, like to love yourself right now, every cell, every bone, every pound, every whatever, to love that and to be honest with it, because then you can make choices that help you lovingly say goodbye to it, not out of hate or ugliness, but just to say, you know what, this pound served me somehow, and like I've got a couple of COVID pans that are with me ever since my 5 months of less activity. And I would like them to be gone, but yet now I'm not willing to make the choices that I need to do. If I'm honest with myself, it's like, no, my little Buddha belly's okay with me right now. Like it's still giving me some comfort. It's still giving me something. I don't know what. But until I'm willing to sit honestly with my choices, it's not going to change. Like there's not some miracle that's going to come take my COVID pants off this body. I have to make a choice. I have to intend to get rid of them and then be willing to show up for myself, to show up for that intention, to be truthful and honest about, I really do. I'm ready now. I'm ready to make a change. I'm ready to bring this intention into my canyon. So I'm willing to, and I also find doing it in community is super important. So, because when it's not just you, when you commit to somebody else and you commit in writing, and the next week you've told somebody you're willing to be honest about your practices and to check in, that is super helpful, super painful at times, but it helps you be in honesty. And it helps to realize that none of us are alone. You know, even though we're all this really special gift, none of us are alone. There's someone else on the planet going through exactly what we're going through. Someone else in the universe is doing exactly what we're doing somewhere, I believe, or has the same sentiment. So we're never alone in our journey. And so belonging to a group is helpful for many in helping to carve new rivulets into their canyon. And so that's why I guide clubs. And my goal, and no, see, this is the languaging thing. I prefer to say gift rather than goal. So my gift to humanity is to write a book about this, and so that people can create their own clubs, their own club changes, and kind of like instead of having a book club, you'd have a club change, and you would have a group of trusted friends that you're, or not friends or strangers, that you're willing to be honest with, and allow your future intention, talk about your intentions. So it's a system to make it easy, because that's what I'm all about. So to follow this system on their own, choose an intention, you know, identify practices, and then every week check in. And so if I can help people create their own club changes, which is why I'm here talking to you right now, that's why I'm trying to do as much as I can to help people enjoy change, not fear it, to be in love with their intentions and lovingly carve that into their life canyon and then share it with their loved ones or not, or with anyone.
It's even, I love your language in there. It's, you know, it's even that decision for change to be a positive thing, as opposed to so many people would treat change as, oh, I have to do this. You know, someone has told me I have to lose the COVID pounds. Somebody has told me I have to stop drinking or stop doing this, right? So, I mean, that set it off in a very negative energy to begin with. So it's, do you find it takes a while for people to, you know, to flip the switch to saying, actually, I'm open to change. It's beautiful. It presents opportunities.
Yeah, no, I witnessed it on a weekly basis in my clubs. I mean, people who, you know, intend things like joy, and then find small practices that bring them joy, and they find that they spend more of their time in joy. The immediate word that came to me as you were responding to that was fear. Like we have many times, instead of living in love, we live in fear. And we're fear of not meeting expectations or fear of not doing. But when you can switch that and be in love with your aspiration or your intention and do small practices that are not as scary, they're not as big. Like when it's, you know, I remember in business school, you know, the goal was always to have these big hairy ass goals, right? They called them BHOGs in graduate school. And man, that like spoke to me. It's like, you know, work hard, play hard, go for that and get to here. and go for that and get to here. And that felt great. You were carving a path, and you were moving, and you were doing stuff and launching products and making money and but now I practice and share setting the gift or goal here and getting there. And that feels even better. Like then you're like feeling like you're rocking the world. You're not just on a path. You're not just struggling through. You are celebrating all the time. So it just feels like it rocks your world versus, okay, I'm trudging through. I'm kind of getting there step by step. I'm doing it. And also the other thing, as you said, is it's other people's expectations. I should lose 10 pounds. My BMI is off, or I should, do a month off to heal my liver, whatever. Well, so who told you should? Whose other values is that you are absorbing? And so when you spend a little time and say, well, what do I know? You know yourself better than anyone. So when you spend a little bit of time being honest with you and the love that you have for you and what you want and why you want it, it helps on the path of bringing your future intentions into your present self with loving kindness and then sharing it with the world.
There's a theory, well, two things I'd like to sort of ask your thoughts on. And one is that, people sometimes almost our voids are our values. And well, first of all, get your thoughts on that. Are our voids our values?
Are our voids our values? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
VOIDS, voids.
Yeah.
Are our voids our values?
So, I mean, to put it into context,
Only if you.
Just sometimes people, they more or less say if when they were growing up, say they didn't have money or they didn't have both parents, or there were certain things they didn't have. So when they get to that point in their life, they're saying, this is the most important thing to me, whether it be money or something else, until sometimes that they actually get what they want.
Okay. Yeah, I think I would probably choose different words than voids or values, but I do think our traumas or our lacks or our resources and the values thereof do form our lessons. So when we can sit again in our honesty of what that situation was, okay, I didn't have money when I was, like, if that was your situation, I didn't have a father. When you can sit in that in a way that sees that experience as a gift and pay tribute to how that it probably did form your values. Like all of our experiences and our choices and our teachers formed our values and our canyon. So yeah, so actually that's interesting. So maybe the canyon is not the void, but the void creates some of those, the way your canyon is shaped. And when you allow yourself to sit in it honestly and say, I think it does shape your choices, right? So you most likely all along, and the ability to be with it in a way that teaches you, I believe our strengths are our weaknesses. So when we're honest about what some of my greatest strengths are also my greatest weaknesses. So I think some of our greatest voids probably have created our biggest values, our biggest assets, because we've perceived that it's a void and we've made choices that fill that. And to this day, my strengths are still my biggest weaknesses and always will be. I think that's just part of being a human being.
No, it's a beautiful way of looking at it. It's, and I'm curious then, in your sort of corporate life as such, and you were talking about all these things you were achieving, but yet, there was, I mean, I'm getting this sense there was this gap. I mean, this gap between who you were and who you truly are, and I think I'm going to be generalistic here, and a number of people will fill that with, substances. They'll fill it with behavior. They'll fill it with everything else, right, to try and close the gap. Although it's a temporary fix for what needs to be a long-term change, right? Does that make sense? Does that resonate?
It makes total sense. And I wouldn't change anything in my path. I don't think anybody should want to change anything in their path. And I loved my corporate career. I mean, I was in the publishing industry. It was a fun industry, low barriers to entry. We got to throw out new things. I was in the high tech industry when it was just thriving, right? And it was fun. It was competitive. It was fast paced. It was smart. It was a blast. But at some point in time, well, yeah, then the internet came along, and it for me, it wasn't a blast anymore. Like suddenly I'd also gotten promoted enough that I was no longer out in the market creating products. I was now in board meetings and budgets and trying to figure out how to make money. And I was like, oh, this is no fun anymore. So I think part of that is the ability to pivot, to sit down with yourself and saying, okay, why am I doing this? What do I get out of it? What do I enjoy out of it? What do I not enjoy out of it? And I mean, I feel like I had the blessing of kind of going in and out of publishing then, and I ended up, working for some other publishers and then going back to my original company and doing different jobs that I also enjoyed, but I kept just narrowing it and toe dipping in other things that were giving me. So I call it saying yes to new things. There was a point in time where I realized that I wasn't as joy filled, and I was, eating and drinking more and exercising less and being, just recognizing that it wasn't bringing me as much joy. I wasn't being the best person I could be on this planet or to people in my relationships. And so I started changing, and going down to this spa was one of them. 20 years ago, it was Christmas, and I just got divorced, and a friend of mine was like, what do you want to do? What are you going to do? And I said, I have no idea what I'm going to do, but I know what I'm not going to do. And that's a choice too, right? And that's totally cool. And she's like, do you want to go to a spa? I'm like, whoa, that's a good idea. Like part of that of being able to sit and being open to new yeses. And I believe when you do that with an open eyes and open hearts and the willingness to see it, that the next right step will appear for you. It just will. It just, at least it has for me. And so being willing to say yes to new things and to say no to new things. But first you got to sit down and show up for yourself. You just got to be willing to sit down and spend a little time, whether it's journaling or thinking or writing or envisioning. That's really the first step. And that's how I feel like every step along the way has happened to me that way. So I started hiking, and I just started saying yes to new things. I joined a choir. I started doing some yoga classes. And it all just built up to, and I'm now just, I could continue to just be in awe of what keeps appearing for me. Like it gets more and more, the more you do it, the more delicious it gets. And the more it's like, wow, I just have to have my eyes open and be willing, and these things appear. And people have always told me that, and I don't believe it, but it's happening to me. So, and I feel like our conversation is one of those. Like, okay, in the pandemic, it was like my mantra was wing it, and I was like, okay, I can do Zoom, and I can take some of these classes online, and then it just, by being open and saying yes to new things, the club change is finding its path on its own, and I'm finding a path where I can shepherd it in a new way. And that feels really special and honorable.
Where do you sit? I mean, in terms of in person versus the Zoom, it's like, I mean, there's that juxtaposition, isn't it, really? It's ease of connection. It's, it's cutting down on travel. It's more efficient versus, in person, right? What's your thoughts? I mean, coming out of this, do you think your business, your approach will change?
That's, you are asking something that I've been in a lot of dialogue with a lot of people over the last few days, especially going into the holiday season. It's like I'm feeling just this conflicted energy in the news with, the new variant and travel restrictions coming in. And I cross the border to Mexico every week. And so I teach live half the week and on Zoom half the week. And I love them both. So I personally really enjoy the Zoom connections, like being out from the comfort of my own home to be able to communicate with people all around the world, including yourself. That feels really special, and that's kind of juice. I'm loving it. But the personal connection definitely adds, and that, I'm learning ways to connect better on Zoom and get that personal connection. But, I have to admit, kind of being back in front of people and teaching classes live and watching and feeling the actual vibration of the energy. That's interesting because if I do sound healing, either through crystal bowls or chanting, and people are like, well, can I because I do it on Zoom and it's different. People are muted out and they do it in their house and I do it here. It's different having that energy, but I also think that those vibrations do come through. Like I feel a certain connection with you, and here we are, a quarter of the way around the planet and able to connect, and it feels special. So what do you find? What are you finding?
Yeah, like a lot of people, I think my one concern, when it's an in-person, there's no doubt that it's a very special connection, but it's just different, right? And it's very personal. It's I'm very intuitive. That's my sort of, I go a lot by my feelings and what I'm sensing. But then the juxtaposition being that we get to, as you say, we get to have this conversation that, no insects are being killed on this conversation, and also, we get to have this. So listen, I think we come back to choices, right? We have the choice and we have the opportunity. And for me, it's like the opportunity to speak to yourself is fantastic. And for that, I'm very, very grateful. So why not? Celebrate both, and whatever will be, right?
Yeah, I must admit that having the choice of both is really a wonderful gift. Like for me, there were, many months when where I teach was closed. And so that did feel restrictive because I couldn't choose to be in front of people. And I even did some courses here locally, and it was with caution, right? It was, wearing masks and being really separated. And so I have to admit that having a vaccinated world and feeling like it's less risky to be with people and to hug, because I love to hug people. So being able to hug people again is just a wonderful gift. And being able to sing and chat with people again too is also a wonderful gift. And we're careful to do it outside and separate still. So it's still impacting the practice of being together. But it certainly is special, especially when there's sound involved. For me, that's a big deal.
Is sound always your primary default vibration, or is it your lowest or your most common factor?
I started meditating without chanting, but I've always enjoyed singing. And then when I started doing bedside singing and seeing how powerful that was, like literally a woman out of a coma almost reached up and grabbed my arm, and I was like, holy, I thought her caregivers were going to faint. And we're all just sitting there crying. And I realized how much sound vibrations can impact our being, and even when we're almost gone, it was like so powerful. So, and I've always chanted. I mean, I've been a yoga student for a long time, so we would chant, and I did a training once and learned some chants. I started teaching chants to my nieces and nephews because I love doing it. So that again has been a gift. So I'd have to answer that question. Yes, chanting and singing help me to get out of my ego and be in breath. And I find that when I practice it, it cleanses my whole container in a way that it's much easier for me to get into a meditative state or a mindlessness state where I can be more in tune and in choice with my thoughts.
Mhm. What are you capable of, do you know?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I'm capable of being me, and I'm capable of being open, and I'm capable of um, being in awe of how powerful that can be. I think I'm capable of anything that I'm willing to commit to and do.
Mm. That is, yeah. And that's the thing, right? Again, we're back to the choice. You know, it's a number of people, you know, and you have it's ask, believe, receive. You know, I'd sort of like to extend it out to ask, believe, do, receive. You know, are you asking the right questions? Do you truly believe it? Are you doing something about it? And are you open?
Yeah, yeah, so true.
I'd be curious to run a thought. I mean, I'm a very, very sort of rough hypothesis on language, and one being, you know, that knowing is the language of the ego. Thinking is the language of the conscious mind. Feeling is the language of the subconscious mind, and sensing being the language of the soul. How does that resonate with you?
Oh, I'm writing it down. I love that. Um,
I notice your language, you use a lot of I feel, which to me just says that's you're sitting within yourself, right? And that's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. That's what I'm picking up anyway, does it?
yeah, I haven't been conscious of it. I'm I work on not not attempting to control other people, to try and kind of say, okay, in my experience, I feel I have, um, and I do believe that my meditation, yoga, and chanting practice have helped and have really helped me to be in my feeling places and to be more comfortable in this gift of me being me in this body, in this container, in this moment. And then leading and club change has brought me, you know, this whole process of being honest with what I want and how I think I can add value on the planet while I'm in this container. And the more often I practice it with others, I mean, I fail sometimes too, right? We just all we can do is the best we can do, and not try and control everybody else and everything else, but just put one foot in front of the other with your best intention and with your best heart and to add value. And um, I think this. I think I do get in better touch with my feeling sense, and I kind of equating that with my soul is interesting. Kind of sensing what's right and what's wrong, and being more courageous and sitting in the scary places where that takes me, and being confident that I'm not alone in that. You know that there's that the world is a great place, and as long as I do the best I can to share that, great things will happen. They do happen.
I mean, I get you, Jill, and I love. I mean, your presence, your being, and how all. Does do people generally get you? Because when you go down those
Some,
paths, yeah, you're gonna always gonna get a mixed bag, right?
yeah, some do and some don't. And you know, and I lead chanting classes and intention setting classes at this spa that I work at. And you know, I'll get people from all over the world and all ages and all genders. And they'll put up with me. Like I've gotten to a point where I can introduce it in a way that's silly, and so they can hopefully stay out of their ego a little bit. Like I say, okay, we're gonna get a little woo-woo now. Close your eyes, come in touch with your breath, you know, be in this container. So I try and create languages, and I would say most of them do get it. One of my gifts, I think, is making it simple and easy enough that people can practice it without judging themselves, without getting an ego. And what I hear from a lot of people is that also, though, the kind of tough love business part of me that keeps people moving is like, okay, now you're going to do this. Like, I don't give them a choice. Like, okay, do this, do that, do this, and I think some people enjoy that mixture of kind of keeping people pushing along and be willing to call out the languaging, when it needs to, and encouraging people to reframe things. And so, yeah, so some people get it and some people don't. I have a lot of return club members who, just come back time after time, and some people don't. They'll do it once a year, or, once every 2 years, and say, okay, I got my juice for whatever I needed, and that's good. And so some people come regularly and some people don't. And this journey for me has been getting out of my ego and not caring about that. So now it's not about the numbers. Like, that's why I hated publishing, because advertising and content sharing became all about numbers and eyeballs, and it was like, it wasn't about content, products, and passion anymore. It lost it. To me, it lost its community. And so now I say, I'm sharing my practices, and you can come share the practice with me. And for most of them, it's contribution based. Like, I charge for very few things other than the 8-week commitment. And I'm learning to probably share less, because I've lost a little bit of my free time. And so I'm finding through my exploration of this is that I have to stop at some point. But at baseline, I am experiencing less and less ego for me, and less ego even for Club Change and the goals I have for that to live on beyond me, and to tribute my father and all my teachers that did it. And I love chanting. So it's like, okay, you can come join me or not. And I won't be like this morning. I don't think I had anybody join me. And I just sat there on Zoom and did my 15-minute chant, and it started my day. And I was like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Keeps me honest.
What where did your father pick it up, or your brother? I mean, where did that come from? Do you know? Because it's
Well, he
it's quite
definitely wasn't
forward,
a,
right? I mean, it's quite
yeah,
forward from him.
he was very forward. And my brothers, and I like to say I have 3 brothers and a father, and 2 sisters. So we were a large family. But my father was a forward thinking man. He was a senior executive with one of the large accounting firms, and actually helped start their consulting practice in the US, and was one of the first international travelers for that business. And he was just super sharp. And then he watched his eldest son, who had a group of friends in college at an Ivy League school, right? And he watched his eldest create this community of men that got together. They all got together and talked about their 7 pillars in their life. And he was like, oh, that's a really cool thing. Let's figure out a way to share that with your younger brothers, who I'm assuming that the relationship between the 4 of them wasn't what my father wanted. So he recommended something, and my older brother was game. And so they started it, and I think they all got something out of it. And it just kind of like this, they were willing to sit in their truth of, okay, here's what we have. Here's what one's enjoying. Here's what, might benefit others. And so it was, and they made up the rules on their own, right? And then I joined, and now my other sisters joined, and we still do it. Like, my father's now passed away, and so is my mother, but the 5 out of 6 of us get together once a year and still do a weekend. And it was called Boys Weekend. And for years, even when I joined, it was still Boys Weekend, just because that's what it was called. And now it's called Boys Weekend Family Retreat, because even I can't quite get rid of the name, because it feels like that's where it started. So now it's this beautiful family retreat that is getting shared, and both my brothers are sharing these practices in their own way as well, with their friends and colleagues, and in the work that they do. And so I don't know, my dad, he was a sharp man, and married a very loving woman, and somehow they magically created a team of people who not only enjoy doing this, but are enjoying sharing it.
Who do you take after?
Oh, I take after my dad. I mean, I'm definitely a mixture of the two, but I'm more my father than I am my mother.
Hmm.
But I think when you grow up in a large family too, with 5 siblings, we kind of raised each other. We were like a tribe, right? Because I don't know, but for my mother, with 6 kids spread out over 17 years, right? We all took care of each other. I think we all took after each other. We took care of each other, and we all took after each other, right? Both our siblings and our parents. And I find it's interesting. I work at this resort, as I've said, but we've got 150 people that come in and out of there every week. And so it's this beautiful human experiment or observation. I get to watch like these people. It's like snowflake. Every week is different. And one of my observations is when people come with groups of their like high school friends or their siblings, it's different when they come with friends that they've met at the resort or at work or in their older years. And I've hypothesized that there's these different friendships of the people who have actually helped form your values versus the ones that you met because they share your values.
Hmm.
And it's really fun to watch because the interactions are different. And don't ask me how they're different. That's an intuitive thing. I don't know how, but they are different. When I watch people who are grade school or high school or college friends versus people who have worked together and found each other, it's we are formed by all of those influences. Our canyon is, and it changes, right? As each day our canyon morphs, and it morphs by who we choose to let it share our experiences with, and who we listen to and who we don't. And
It's down to choices again, isn't it? We keep coming back to this. As you said, it's
choice. It's all choice. It's all choice. Although when we were born, it wasn't our choice, right? We were born with, I think as human beings, we were born with this gift, whatever it is, this special, I don't know, is it soul, combination of conscious and unconscious and ego, right? Like that's part of the gift too, how we process that gift and what we've chosen to do with it and learn from it. And I think choice is big. And we can choose to change. Like that's what intention is all about. We can choose to add value. We can choose to bring good things to ourselves and to others. And we can choose even to understand that we're not in choice, right? Which sounds really weird, but people who aren't in choice are victims, constant victims, or blaming. It's wasn't my choice. This happened to me. That happened to me. This is I guess the honesty comes when you can sit in it and say, whoa, but this is my truth. Like this doesn't matter what my environment is. I have a choice of being in it and not victimized by it, but be in it and choose what to do.
Yeah, it is so powerful. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to listen to your recording. Is it all your good questions? It's great. It's great. It's a great path. It's great stuff what you're doing, Pete. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's to me it's a guilty pleasure, right? It's just I get to speak to people, and I can't help but listen to the language, and and I love it. People, because like when everyone shares their passion or shares what they do or they're supposed to do, it gives off so much energy, and that in turn gives me energy. So why not?
Yeah, I feel exactly the same.
I love that. And even that thought of you at the retreat and having people coming through each week, and fresh ideas and fresh energy, and especially seeing them when it's their vacation, it's their opportunity, right? So they're there out of choice. They're there, what it is. Tell me just on
Well,
that.
I get to and then I get to share with them how powerful it was for me 20 years ago to come there. So, you asked about my corporate career. I mean, it was that year after 9/11 was a big impact for me. It impacted my career. It impacted my relationship. It impacted everything. So 2002 was a big year. And I share that. It was like, wow, taking the time to notice that and open yourself up to new yeses and new nos is really big. To do things, I think in some ways I would just like invite everybody to, if it's scary, if it feels scary, go do it. Go just create a way to toe dip, because that's where your lesson is. That's where the aha is, because it's not in your canyon. It's not comfortable. So if you are noticing that you aspire to something different than what is, be willing to go to the places that are edgy to allow yourself to be open to some new lesson.
Yeah.
And the edgier it feels, the scarier it is, the more fearful it is, probably the more delicious it's going to be as you start to step in it.
Someone had said to me a while ago that, we choose everything. We choose the good and the bad in our lives. And it's being responsible for your choices and saying that whilst I may have chosen that, I'm now choosing not to choose that again. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, and there's a parable that one of my favorite meditation teachers does, and it's a parable about, choosing a street, and there was a hole in the sidewalk, and I fell in, and it took me a day to find my way out. And then the next day I walked down that. I'm gonna totally bastardize this. Sorry, Michelle. But the next day I walked down the same street, and I fell in the hole again. This time it only took me an hour to fall out. And then the next time, I walked down the same street and I saw the hole and I walked around it. And then the next day, I actually chose to take a different street. And it was like, what a great parable and lesson for being in choice, and then choosing to see.
Yeah.
Choosing to see what your experience is, even if it's hard, even if you're a dark hole and it takes you a day or 3 months to go for it. And part of that too is, I think, being willing to ask for help. So being willing to be honest and be vulnerable, and recognize that, you're in choice and you can choose to ask for help. And sometimes that's the best thing to do. And it gives me goosebumps because it's still the most powerful. Like even with my siblings, I remember one time I got together with them, and it was at one of our sessions, and I said, you know what, you guys, I can't hear you. Like they joked with me for a certain thing, right? And it's like, you know what, that hurts. Like I don't want to interact with you guys that way anymore. And it was super hard for me to say. It was super vulnerable, and I couldn't control it, but I could say, this is how it makes me feel. And then they get to choose whether to change their behavior. But I got to ask for their help. I got to admit that that I saw it in a new way, and ask them to see it in a new way. And I think being vulnerable is a big part of the journey, of the soul's journey, or the gift's journey, or the fire in your belly is knowing when to ask for help, when to do research or see a therapist, or, for me, I think sometimes it's like just throwing a lot of money at it, hiring somebody to help you. And that's totally okay, because if you can be in the honesty of, okay, this is what I've done, and this is what I've tried, and this is where I'm at, and I can still see that silver lining at the top of my canyon, and I've made these choices, and I've done these baby steps, and I see myself here, but I see that this intention, I want even more of it. I see that I could add more value. To just be honest and say, okay, somebody else is going to see this in a different way, and I want to be open to seeing that. So I guess it's kind of the same way being open to the universe, is being open to someone else, being able to show you and nourish this rivulet for you. And sometimes that's the hardest, edgiest thing, and that's okay too. Like you're right. It's like, if it's a choice to be in a hard place, but if you want what it is you want, and you're willing to take an action, just kind of what you said earlier about values, ask, believe, do, right? ask for what you want, believe you can get there, then be honest as you're doing it, do the actions. And if the actions are, wow, I can't do this all by myself, be okay with that. Be loving about that. Like, be, wow, I can ask for help.
Yeah.
Or I can sit and meditate and just, I can be helpless too. Like, that's part of it too. It's like, holy shit, none of this is working. I call it obstacle dissolving. Like, you can feel super motivated and power over it and take action instantly. Or you can say, I can't, I don't feel powerful to go over this obstacle, so I'm just going to turn away from it, but I'm doing it by choice. Or I can choose to ask for help, or I can choose to do what I call a hail Jill, which is, just throw the ball down the field and hope that your team catches it. Just give up trying to control it at all, and just be in it and have hope and faith. And that's powerful too.
It's a beautiful mentor of mine, a guy, Alexander Inchbald and Peter Koenig, and they talk about a reclamation process. And it's similar to that in that, if you could do nothing more than reclaim the energy that you spend holding yourself back, if you were just to neutralize that, never mind doing something, if you were just to neutralize the energy you spend not being something or being something that you're not, that alone would be life-changing, right?
Yeah, that reminds me of kind of all the people who are into the law of attraction now, right? It's the same thing. It's like, if you're always spinning and talking about something and it's something that's not good in your life, you're attracting, you're attracting that. You're spending a ton of time with people and thoughts and actions, behaviors that are not healthy for you. Like, noticing it, be in it, show up for yourself, sit down and show up. Like, that's my first step. Just show up for yourself in a loving kind of way.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. I have a funny feeling we could talk for a long time, Jill,
We could. So next time I'm in London, I'm going to look you up.
Yeah, do. So tell me, what's a bit of a guilty pleasure for you? You can take the guilt out of it if you wish. What's your go-to?
Oh, naps and reading. Naps and reading are, and I notice that I'm feeling guilty, and then I say, no, that's your mind and body and spirit saying that you cannot pour from an empty cup, and all of these things need to be renewed. So napping and reading are good things, and I feel like it keeps to renew my energy around what I'm doing and how I share with people around me. So that's it. And dark chocolate is one of my guilty pleasures. I really enjoy ice cream and dark chocolate. So I actively have to be in choice for that, and I have to choose to not buy it sometimes. So
well,
so I would
listen,
say those are my guilty pleasures.
It's good to have the to recognize the good. Sometimes you have to test the bad, or the other side. So it helps to give healthy contrast in life, doesn't it? It's a
yes.
Yeah. So just to remind
Yes,
myself
it
what's
does.
possible. Oh dear. What
May I ask you what yours are, Pete? May I ask you the same question?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've a number of guilty pleasures. One is having these conversations. It genuinely is a guilty pleasure for me. And we've recorded well over 400 episodes. We've released 260 odd episodes. And as another one of my mentors said, listen, if you're going to do something, just do it for 2 years and then we'll review, because it would be very easy to sort of question or think or whatever, right? But now it's beautiful. I get to spend an intimate conversation with people and sharing, and it's fabulous. It really is fabulous. So
I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's so yeah, why not? And this is the one beautiful thing that we have, this amazing thing called the internet, and situations are what they are, and it's like, well, maybe life's happening for you, not to you. So yeah, embrace.
Love that. I would say the same. Club change for me is definitely a guilty pleasure.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That is beautiful. if you were to describe your fire in the belly then in one or two words, Jill, what would they be?
Describe my family.
Describe your fire in the belly.
My fire in the belly. Adding value.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Tell us, where can people learn more about Club Change? Where can they learn more about you? How can they hunt you down, track you down, connect
Well,
with
they
you?
could spend a week at Rancho La Puerta in Tecate, Mexico. So that's because I teach there 4 days a week. And my website is jillthiry.com. And on there, your listeners can find Club Change. I do a monthly Set Your Intentions class where I do that word boarding exercise, and that's for free. And the next one is coming, and January is a busy month, right? So I'm going to do one on January 9th and January 26th. But each one of those starts an 8-week club. So people can join a club if they feel like they want the nourishment of community and a club around them. And I guide those clubs right now. And so I start a new 8-week club every month. But I also chant every week, and I just got certified during the pandemic. I got certified as a yoga instructor. So I'm doing, because I really find that movement and breath as a practice impacts how you are in the world and your intentions. So it's been, I mean, I've always loved recreation and teaching skiing and swimming, which I've done forever, but teaching yoga and chanting and doing them and practicing them helps me get out of my head, and I'm finding it helps others get out of their head. And so I add a little bit of the affirmation and intention work into the chant class and into the yoga class. And as I said, I'm just sharing my practice. So right now it's contribution based. If people want to send me money, they can. If they don't, it's no big deal. We just come do it.
I love it.
What's
something that not many people know about you?
Oh, I'm pretty out there, Pete. Pretty much everybody knows everything about me. And I love constructive criticism. So I'm one of those people that's like, okay, what could I do better? Like, I'd love to go to you and say, okay, what could I do better next time? I'll go to my friends after they listen to this. Hey, that I write song. I kind of have been creating my own songs and little chants. So I never have considered myself a writer. Even because writing this book for me has been one of these very long practices that I'm having to super change my own practices to get it done. But when I was young, I in England, you'll get a kick out of this. I went to Europe and had, I'm one of those open-ended tickets and a Euro pass. And long story short, I was camping. And so of course, when you're hitchhiking through England and Ireland, and sometimes I was camping like in the middle of these cow fields, like, right, that they would convert a trough to a restroom. And I would go 2 or 3 days without speaking to anyone. And after being raised in a family of 6 people, I realized it was the first time ever in my life that I was totally by myself, not speaking to anyone. And I found myself writing songs and poetry. And that was like, wow. And that's coming back to me. So I just kind of been walking around, and all of a sudden a little song ditty will come to me, and I'll record it on my phone now. And that's how I'm writing my book, by recording my chapters on the phone. Like that's how I'm an audio person. You can tell I love to talk. I love to share. And so people know, I don't think many people know that about me.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. When's the book coming, do you think?
Oh,
you talked about accountability.
yeah, so I kept changing my practices because I was not moving forward. And so I did have 22-page manuscript written prior to the pandemic, but now everything changed because now I'm doing it online. So I just picked it up last month and reread it. And I was like, oh, do I have to rewrite it? Because now it's all different. Do I write something different? So I would say 2022 would be a good year for the manuscript to be complete, for me to be like not in perfectionist mode about it and just to put it out there in whatever way and let it go. So I think I can birth a book this next year.
Beautiful, beautiful. Look forward to it. Look forward to it.
I'll let you know.
Yeah, please do. Please do. You'll have to come on and tell us about it.
Oh, that'd be great.
So tell us, is there a final message you'd like to leave with our listeners?
I think the final message is to be kind. Just to be kind to yourself. When you notice yourself not saying nice things to yourself, take a breath and see if you can switch up that language and be kind to yourself. And when you're kind to yourself, you'll be kind to others.
Beautiful. So simple. Jill, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you. I appreciate your sharing and your time. So thank you.
Ditto. Thank you.